everyone. I think that we are currently live. I'm like checking my YouTube page just in case. Yes, we are live indeed. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our amazing Pride Month edition of the book club. I am here with George M. Johnson. They are an amazing author who has written our book of the month, and which I've realized is not on my desk. For once, I'm not reading it online. I have a physical copy and it's nowhere near me. This is classic preparedness from the book club here. But we are going to be talking about All Boys Aren't Blue. Incredible from George there, just being so prepared. My favorite thing is when authors come and there's always like their books in the background, a poster, like Karen McManus had like a whole massive bookshelf of all the different editions of her book. It was great. I love to see it. So as I'm sure that most people who have joined us are already part of the book club and know how it works, but just in case you've jumped onto this video and are like, what's a book club? How does this work? Basically every month we read a new YA book, and then we come on the last Tuesday of the month, do a live stream with the author, and you can ask any questions that you want. So I'm going to be looking at the live chat to see if there's any questions that have come in there. We've had some amazing questions in from the wonderful members on the Discord. If you aren't on the Discord already, anyone who's watching, check it out. The link's in the description. Always absolutely amazing questions from them. We also, just to let everyone know, spoiler wise, we're going to not spoil anything for this first section. We are going to talk about that more in the second section. So if anyone hasn't quite finished yet, you will know when spoilers are coming because I will signpost it. But for now, you can still watch. You don't worry, you will still be able to enjoy it even if you haven't quite finished the book yet. Because I know I will always remember the time that we had someone literally finishing the book as the live stream was starting, like racing to the finish to try and get it all done before the live stream went live, and kind of came in 5 minutes late, like, I did it, okay, I can watch. So I'm always wary of people who haven't quite managed to finish yet. Sweet. So hello, George, how are you doing? How's it going?
I'm pretty well today. It is the last day of Pride Month, and Pride Month is always the busiest month of the year for me. And so it is nice to have survived another Pride Month. And I'm always busy writing and working. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. Like I said, it's been a very long but great Pride Month as the world is reopening. And yeah.
Amazing. So, right. First question that I want to ask you. So we obviously have some authors who come in here and they have like always written for teenagers. They've always done young adult writing. You weren't necessarily writing for like young adults before you wrote this book. So what made you decide to write this as like a YA, a kind of teen, a young person offering?
Yeah, for me, we were having a lot of violence that I was seeing towards queer youth. I had written several articles about it, specifically that of Giovanni Melton, who was a young Black gay boy who was killed by his father. We also had the situation around Ed Buck and Gilmore Moore, and I was just seeing how Black queer people, Black queer youth specifically, were being treated in society. And I felt that over the years as a journalist, I'd written about my story in bits and pieces, but I felt it was time to put something together, a comprehensive work that not only could be used as a resource guide for adults, but specifically talk to kids in a way and talk to the youth in a way that I wish I had when I was growing up. And so, yeah, that was really the decision behind doing the book as a young adult book. Furthermore, understanding that the youth are who become the future leaders. And so if you can get the text in their hands and shape their minds now, when they do become those future leaders and movement leaders and politicians and all of the people in power, they already go into it with a mindset that people like us exist as well and deserve the same rights and equities as everyone else.
That's amazing. I mean, I feel like through the book, there is like absolute this sense of like, if you had this book when you were younger, the differences that would have made to your life and to your kind of journey. What's the response been like from young people who have read the book? You found that?
Yeah, the response has been amazing. I mean, with the pandemic, it's hard to gauge how many people, I would say, under the age of 18 have actually had a chance to read the book. But I've spoken with a lot of classrooms. So I do know the book has reached a lot of classrooms and has reached a lot of the youth. The responses I get, whether it's a direct message or email or some of the beautiful cards they send me in the mail, about how the book changed their lives, about how some people decided to transition, after reading the book, or decided to publicly state their queerness to their family and to their friends after reading the book. I know the book is affecting them in a large way. And I know that my presence as being a queer person who is still living and who is showcasing the totality of my journey and my family and all those things, it aids in letting them know that they can have those same things. And so in many ways, the book has become a possibility model for them of what can be. And so I'm really fortunate that it is getting to them. And I'm also fortunate that the demographic, like 25 to 34, is feeling so seen in the book. Because I think we assume that once we reach adulthood, that we've begun the healing journey and the healing process, and that we've addressed the things from our past. I think this book has helped so many people within that age demographic and even older come to terms with a lot of the things that they went through, and be able to start to go on their own healing journey as well.
You call it like a memoir manifesto, like that's the kind of way that you put it. So it sounds like, was that always the intention from the beginning, or was it as you found yourself like thinking about your youth that this more manifesto element of the memoir came out, or did it go the other way around? They wanted you to do something that was more manifesto-like, and then you were like, hey, let's actually talk about what was going on with me when I was younger, because I feel like that all kind of works together.
Yeah, no, it was always, if I recall, it was always a manifesto. It was always like my declaration to the world about what the existence of the Black queer person and the Black queer experience was. I always say I'm not the first person to have this story. I'm just one of the first people that have been allowed to tell it. And so I feel like in many ways that's part of what the manifesto is like, being able to put truth to power, being able to right a lot of the wrongs of what history has taught us about Black queer people and our existence, and being able to continue, upon building the legacy of queer writing. Queer writers have always existed and have been some of the greatest storytellers and culture shifters that have ever been here. And so me adding my name to that, me entering new ground in many ways. When we talk about specifically targeting young adults, we don't have a lot of texts that specifically go directly into that market. And so in many ways, it was, the declaring of in the taking up of space in a place where we have always existed, even if we have never been acknowledged. And so, yeah, I think from the very beginning, we felt, and I felt, that this book was going to be special. And seeing what it's doing now, being adapted in multiple formats and having multiple language translations now. And, over a year since the book has come out, I'm still doing major press around this book, and people are still learning about this story. I think it's a testament to the reason of why we felt it was going to be a manifesto.
Amazing. So I'm just looking at the chat. Hello to, there's a few people on here. Pippin is on here. Moonbook is on here. Pippin would like to know, so would I. The cover is amazing. Did you have any input into that?
Yes, I had full input into what the cover looks like. And funny enough, if you talk to my editor, Grace, she tells everybody that I was very adamant about what the cover needed to look like and needed to portray from the very beginning of the book. I wanted the book to I wanted the book cover to do two things. One, I wanted people to feel seen from the cover, a Black queer face on a cover. And I wanted people to feel seen in that, a queer face on a cover. The femininity and the masculinity merged together, like all of the effects of it all needed to go together. And the second thing was I wanted it to make people angry who were homophobic. And I wanted it to make people cringe who were afraid to read a story like this. And so I think the cover accomplished all of that. Everything was intentional about the cover, from the blue fading into the pink to which flowers I chose for the crown. It was extremely intentional. And I think that is what has also helped the book do what it is doing, because many people look at the cover and see it as something that is really, really different and really, really vibrant, and in a statement before you even, open up the pages of the book, it's making a bold statement.
Absolutely. I mean, like this is so interesting, because I mean, this is a question that often like the members of the book club are really interested in, because there's so many books we've read that have really amazing covers, or like it's a super different cover in the American versus the UK version, things like that. And it almost always gets asked, and there's such a difference between some authors have like no say over the cover, some have some, and I feel like you're probably the most involved we've had an author be on the book cover, which is really exciting. I guess I would actually, I'll ask this as well, because I think that this kind of ties into it. I know at the end of the book, you kind of talk a bit more about the title. It sounds like you also had input into that, and like that feels like has a lot of meaning for you. I'm wondering if you could like, talk a little bit about the title, how it came to be, and like what it means for you in the context of the book.
Yeah, when I originally submitted the book, it was called Smile, Black Boy Smile. Once we started going through the acquisitions process, they felt that they wanted a title that connected more with the overarching theme of queerness in the book, specifically. And so they gave me the option to choose a second title. And so All Boys Aren't Blue was the next title that I chose, that I felt best represented what people were going to get from the book thematically. Yeah, I mean, blue has several meanings, but I mean, I think the main meaning is, exactly what it's stating, is that, when we have these gender reveals and we determine gender at such a young age for a person, we put a set of standards on them. And so blue just represents, when the blue smoke or the blue fireworks or the blue paint or the blue whatever comes out at that gender reveal, it automatically starts a vicious cycle of heteronorms that are placed upon boys, and same for girls, right? When pink comes out, they're like, oh, we got to buy tutus, or oh, we got to buy basketballs, and it sets up these standards that sometimes we cannot live up to, because it is not us, it is not who we are innately. And so in saying all boys aren't blue, I'm just simply saying all of us are not going to fit this set of standards that determine masculinity and that determine how we should navigate in the world. And in making the declaration of saying, I am a boy who is not blue, or I was a boy who was not blue, and I am now non-binary, and, we have queer, and we have trans, we have, all of these labels of people who at birth were deemed blue. And, it just was to kind of put it out there that some of us are gray, and some of us are yellow, and some of us are orange, and we're some of us are just not this. And I just wanted it to be clear from the very beginning. I think some people didn't catch the title, but a lot of people who, once I say the title and it hits them and they're like, oh my God, okay, I never thought about it like that. And it's like, yeah, like, all of us are not going to be the same, all children innately, we are not going to be this set standard of what we are forced into through assimilation. And yeah, that's pretty much the main meaning of the whole All Boys Aren't Blue.
I found it really exciting, because I think that the idea of like representation of queer men specifically is like that there is this, what I think is a real misunderstanding, where people will be like, oh, I really hate that like all queer men representation is effeminate and blah blah blah. I'm like, oh, actually, I don't know whether you'd agree with this. I feel like you maybe do, that like it's not necessarily that the representation has been effeminate or kind of more feminine queer men. It's that the like butt of the joke has been feminine queer men, and actually like proper representation where they get to tell their own stories, or people who do have like a more complicated relationship with gender or are kind of exploring it and not actually getting proper representation, that we're much more likely to see kind of very one-dimensional, badly developed caricatures in comedy shows than we are like actual fully rounded characters. So for me, this book was so exciting because it was like, hey, we're going to dig like really deep into all of the nuances and like the truth of someone who had that experience growing up. Do you feel like that kind of was something you were aware of, that there wasn't necessarily a ton of people speaking about this same experience?
Yeah, and I think for me, it was important to break the notion of the stereotyping and break the notion of the caricature of what queerness has had to look like. It has looked like a one-dimensional thing, very overly flamboyant, very just overly flamboyant or like sassy or like, and I think for me, it was to say, yes, we are this and we love this. I love this, even though I know everybody else don't. I love it because I am it. But we are also this, and we are complex people, and we are nuanced people. And I am I'm a person who can play sports, and I'm very good at sports, but I'm also a person who enjoys getting my fingernails done, and I enjoy wearing mascara, and I enjoy, wearing quote unquote feminine clothing at times. And I enjoy a lot of things. I'm not just this cookie cutter version of anything. And my community is not a cookie cutter version of anything. And, I believe it all needs to be showcased. I believe that we all deserve space to showcase who we are and just how full and how rich our community is. I think, unfortunately, femmes get attacked because of the stereotyping and because of but it's not us that's doing that, right? Like, it's a mainstream society that is using it as another tool to oppress us. And so I think for me, the notion, really was to tell the totality of my story, tell the totality of our story, and in effort to break ground so that others can also tell the different parts of our story as Black queer people. And I think we're doing a great job in doing that, right? I think, people can look at Billy Porter, people can look at me, and people can look at Lil Nas X. We are technically part of 3 different generations. And I think that's cool that you get to see what Blackness and queerness looks like in this image from the perspective of the 20-year-old, the perspective of the 35-year-old, and the perspective of the 50-year-old. But then, we have other parts of queer community that don't exist the way that we exist, but it all goes together and it all should be showcased. And I think that's all that this was really about. And so, I think us who are deemed more effeminate, we get a very bad rap, and it's internalized homophobia. It is assimilation and people's fear that we are effeminizing men and we are ruining community and all of those things that go into it. And I just think realistically, it's all BS. And I am proud of, who I am, what my community looks like, and how my community is learning to love on one another, whether our energies are masculine or feminine, whether our identities are LGBTQIAKP+, like, we're all having to learn to unlearn the harm that heterosexual community has placed to make us adversaries when it comes to femmes and butch queens and all of the labels that we use. I'm just glad that this is just one part of the spectrum that I got to tell. And I love that, there are other memoirs by Saeed Jones and by Michael Arsenault and by Darnell Moore and by Casey Gerald, that get to tell the other parts of it. And collectively together, you get to see what our whole community shaped out to look like. And I love that.
Amazing. I guess, like, stepping away slightly from the more kind of thematic and wider questions within the memoir, like, because it's a memoir, like, normally when we're talking to authors, we're talking about like fictional characters. And it's strange because for us, like, for readers, they almost do feel like they're still fictional, but they're very real people in your life. How did you go about sort of like writing about real people, not wanting to do them justice, or how far did you feel like you could fictionalize them, or did you really want it to be like truthful to your experience? Like, how did you balance that as a writer?
Yeah, I mean, I stayed as true to my experience as possible. There was no fictionalizing of anyone. These people are in the book are my family. They're my real family. They're the family that people see in my stories. They're the family that people see on vacation, and the family when I post pictures or anytime I'm on certain events that's commenting. This is the same family that's in the book. And they're very real people. I think you have to, part of it is learning to write in a way that doesn't villainize. I do my best to not villainize. I think for me, it's coming from a restorative justice angle. And I have no desire to villainize or no desire to harm my people in a way that the world and society already has done. And so even if family members have done me wrong, I still think that they're not the like their wrongs are not the totality of who they are. And so my whole goal with the book was to write about it in totality, was to write about these characters in totality and to write about myself in totality. So that you got the full shape experience of what every character, and I'm calling them characters, but they're really people, but what every character in this book was, because they're humans and, you know, they live, besides Nanny passing, but they live at the, you know, where we're alive, right? And I think that's the thing about fictional queer characters, you know, you hear that they often die at the end or go through certain things and don't have family and, you know, a lot of just based in the trauma. And my goal was to write about the good, the bad, the traumatic, and the triumphs. And I think we achieved that. And I think the book is better for that because it gave a well-rounded experience of what my life has been and what my life continues to be.
You talk a little bit about how it felt kind of strange, like the word memoir, stepping into a memoir as someone who's like, my life hasn't ended yet. Like I'm still doing the life thing, and you're asking about a memoir. But it kind of makes sense as something that's specifically talking about your younger years. But I'm really interested, like because you do talk a little bit about the idea of, you know, queer people having a kind of like a delayed puberty almost, like we kind of have this growing up situation that happens when we're a little bit older, because it's like, all of these things that I should have experienced by this age, actually I was dealing with other stuff. There was things going on where I was trying to work out what the hell was going on with me before I could start thinking about this other stuff. So I'm really wondering, like, what you think, whether anything about the book would have changed if you had written it earlier or later, like anything about your you know, your view of your childhood or your view of this experiences you talk about have changed, or whether you feel like this is kind of like a more of a timeless exploration of who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I think had I written about it younger, it wouldn't have been the same, only because I wouldn't have learned a lot of the things that I had learned just around my own politic around abolition, my own politic around restorative justice, my own politic just around spirituality looked different 5 years ago than it does today. So I think writing it back then, it would have looked different. I think had I written it post when I wrote it, I don't think it would have looked a lot different. It probably would have looked the same, and it probably would have been even more of my spirituality infused in it, and like the things that I do now would have probably been a little bit more heavier influenced in it. But yeah, overall, you know, the decision to write a memoir at 33 years old, you know, a lot of people were like, that's an interesting choice. But I think after reading the book, people are like, wow, you lived a lot of life by the time you were 21, yeah. Like you lived a lot of life. And I was like, yeah, a lot of us have lived a lot of life because we were dealing with the duality of a life. I wasn't just dealing with being a Black boy. I was also dealing with being a queer boy, and I was dealing with being a Black queer boy. And so that's almost 3 different lives lived by the age of 21, and 3 different assessment points and viewpoints trying to be synthesized into one body by the age of 21. And so I think it was necessary. And I love, you know, if I had it my way, I probably would have written about things that happened after the age of 21, but I thought that was a great place to stop, specifically for young adults, because I think it ends at the perfect place for them. And it gives me the space to talk about what the 15 years after that looked like, maybe in a future writing. So, yeah.
Amazing. Another question from Pippin. Did you enjoy narrating the audiobook yourself?
Yes, I did enjoy narrating it. It's not as easy as I would. I mean, I guess I didn't go to it think it was easy, but I thought it was gonna be a little easier. It was tough to narrate.
I wrote this. Like, I should be able to say this. Like, this is literally my voice.
But I think also part of it was like I felt that I had gotten to a place where I had healed a lot of things. And so like when I talked about some of the more traumatic moments in the book, it was very emotional to get through those moments. And but it was good and it was necessary and it was healing to say it out loud and to speak it out loud. So I'm very glad I did the audiobook. And I'm glad I did it because what people will tend to say is that I have a gay sounding voice or a queer sounding voice. And so I think the book being read by someone else wouldn't have had the power that it had being read by me, because you hear my voice. And so you can then easily understand why as a child, I couldn't necessarily hide anything, because this is my voice only grew to be here, but the sound of it, the queer sound of it, the gay sound of it, always existed. And that's the thing. People talk about, oh, you sound gay. And it's like, yeah. And so the audiobook sounds gay.
For people who are watching, don't forget, if you want to ask any questions to George, leave them in the live chat. I am watching it. I will be able to see. We had another comment from Pippin when you were talking about the cover, saying the cover really is stunning, which, you know, yes, we all agree. And also, as just said, having it read by the author really adds to this kind of book. I think, yeah, like I've definitely seen kind of authors reading all kinds of books, but when it is specifically memoir, when it is something that's so personal, yeah, I feel like it would feel really strange to be like read by this random actor. Like, come in and read it instead. So yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So I want to talk a little bit now about inspiration. We always do like a little inspiration section about like what kind of inspired the book to be written or things like that. So I'm really interested if there's like any authors that inspire you generally, or like specifically when you were writing the book that you really kind of either drew from or were kind of made you excited about writing.
I mean, I had just read, as I stated earlier, I had just read Darnell Moore's book, No Ashes in the Fire, and I just read Michael Arceneaux's I Can't Date Jesus. And so I kind of went into it, you know, really inspired to tell my story, because I loved both of their stories. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be fun to kind of tell another side of the story. So I was definitely inspired by them. I'm inspired by the great writers and thinkers that we had during the HIV epidemic, Essex Hemphill and Marlon Riggs, and Asante, and all of them inspire me because as someone who lives with HIV, I get to be part of what the vision was to be able to live with the virus and continue to do this type of work in art. And so, you know, unfortunately, they succumbed to the virus, but their work and their art still exists. And now I get to be a piece of the continuation of what they started. And so I love that. And yeah, I'm inspired by, I have another friend, Hari Ziad, who's an amazing writer. Their book, Black Boy Out of Time, I think it's called Black Boy, yes. Black Boy Out of Time just recently came out and is doing amazingly well. And that's their Black queer story. And I've always been inspired by Hari. So yeah, I pull my inspiration from a lot of places. I definitely pull my inspiration from several other writers. But a lot of times I'm in my own bubble and I'm in my own writing space. And I don't want, and there are times where, like, I love Robert Jones too with The Prophets. Robert's writing has always been amazing. But I'm oftentimes, like I said, in my own space when it comes to my writing process and how I want my story to be told, or how I want the story to be told, because I don't like it to be jaded by anyone else's style of writing. And so sometimes when you read someone else's work, you can easily start to like mimic. And I'm also very, very careful about that. So if I'm in the middle of writing, I'm typically not reading anyone else's work because it'll then affect the way I'm writing mine. So yeah, a lot of times I'm in my own cocoon and in my own bubble when I'm writing.
Well, depending on whether or not you're writing right now, this question will either have an answer or it won't. So Cave on Instagram has asked, what are you reading right now? I guess if there's anything you've just read as well.
I'm reading Cecily Bowen's I think it's called Bad Fat. Is it Black Fat Feminist? I know it's called like Bad, but it's called Notes of a Trap Feminist. But it's my friend Cecily wrote a book that's coming out soon. And so I'm currently reading that, and it's amazing. But I am also writing. The good thing is that the book I'm writing now is nonfiction, and I'm writing it in the style of writing letters. So reading other people's work isn't affecting that, because I'm not writing prose or like narrative style. I'm writing as if I'm writing a letter. So I can read that and still be okay with what I'm writing.
Well, like, since you've mentioned that, I guess be useful to ask now, what an incredible segue you've created for me. How did you make the decision for the different like styles of writing that were in this book? Like when you went into your family chapter and you were kind of speaking more directly to those people rather than like having it be more of a story for the audience, like was that something that was really like you purposely planned before you started writing, or was it just when you got to those sections, it just kind of came to you that way?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't planned before. I believe when I was writing the first draft was when it kind of hit me. Like, I was like, do I have a chapter to my brother, or should I just say what I feel? And I was like, you know what? I think I should just say what I feel. And so I decided to incorporate the letter writing within, because I just felt like sometimes chapter writing can be cumbersome. And it's like, well, what stories do you include? What stories don't you include? What are you trying to say exactly? What theme are you trying to get across? How is it connected to the rest of the book? And when I took a step back, I was like, I just want to be able to express how I feel about them and how I feel they were to me in a really loving and supportive way that looks different than maybe what I've seen in most books that I've read. That's just straight from the heart. And so I felt that the letter writing was the best style choice to convey that, because I felt that everything didn't necessarily need to be a chapter, that some things just needed to be said. And so I was glad that they liked the concept of it. And a lot of people loved that I did it. So a lot of people who read the book loved the letter to my brother the most out of them. But yeah.
I think it's very like, me and my brother always say we can tell when a writer is an only child and tries to write siblings, because you're like, oh no, I think you really, there's a real element of hatred at some point. You got to have some kind of like, there's something in there, even when you love each other, you're still like, listen.
Yes. Our relationships require work.
Like you're trying to explain this to someone who's an only child and you're like, no, but they're great. I love them. They're amazing. And it's like, you used to beat each other up. And I'm like, no, don't listen. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's just a sibling thing. But yeah, no, I definitely felt like there was a lot of, like you really feel the love and the connection and like that complex relationship that's coming out between kind of all of the members of your family in the book, which is amazing. I like really, that was like something that I really loved in there. Was there anything that you were wanting to include that you didn't get to, like stuff that you were kind of was in an original plan that got left out, or that you just didn't have space for, or was it all pretty much like from the beginning to end you sort of knew everything that you wanted and it all got its place?
No, we cut out 3 chapters of the book. They were good chapters. The publisher just didn't feel they fit thematically with where the book was going. And so 3 of the chapters ended up getting cut. But the good thing is all 3 of those chapters are in the new book. So
hey, there we go, nailed it.
So I still got to tell those stories. I think the main thing with this book was the centering of me as the main character. And so some of those stories didn't necessarily center me as much. And I think the great thing is like this book gave you one side of those characters. The new book gives you more in-depth looks at my cousins, my brother, and specifically my grandmother, who is the catalyst for the next book. So
that sounds amazing, because she sounds so incredible in this one. It was like so great to read about. Had a question from a Quaker witch who asks, how did you convince your publishers to let you write so frankly about sex?
They convinced me. So that actually was a lot easier, because I wrote very clinically about sex the first time, and her note was like, this needs to be spiced up. That was literally what her note was. It was just like, glad you're talking about it, but spice this up. And so I went back and I just basically wrote exactly what happened. And when she got it, she was like, yes, this is what we would, this is it. And so I was more like, oh, I can't believe I'm saying all this stuff and everybody gonna know my business like this. But I think at the end of the day, it was necessary. People need to understand that we all don't have sex the same and it all doesn't look alike. And that, you know, the denial of sexual education and sexual health is only becomes a burden and a hindrance and a danger to us as we become young adults who, you know, matriculate into adulthood and have no reference for any of these things. And so writing about it so frankly, tough, you know, because you know that there's a notion that there's a certain age that shouldn't know about sex. But the problem is, which is why I made sure I wrote about sex early on in the book. The problem is those things, those conversations are coming up, even if you keep the information away from us, your kids are still talking about it. So what you're really doing is sending them into a battle with no weapons. And so this book now gives them some type of something to arm themselves with.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about we've got quite a few aspiring writers and people who love to write in the book club. What advice would you give for someone who wants to pursue writing, either writing kind of books or writing more as a kind of journalistic kind of pursuit?
Yeah, I mean, the first piece of advice is to write. I think a lot of times we think so much about writing that we just don't write. It's like, well, start writing. So that's literally the first piece of advice, is to start writing. I say the second thing is research. What I see is that a lot of people who are wanting to be authors or journalists don't do enough research to know what already exists. And that is where a lot of people falter, is because they don't know it already exists out there. And so even though your story is your story, there may be variations of your story that exist. And so sometimes it's not about the fact that you don't get to tell your story. It's just sometimes the angle might need to look a little bit different. And so I think doing the research and knowing what already exists out there is important. And then I think the third thing is what doesn't exist, because that is how I became successful, was because I wrote the stories that didn't exist. There were things going on around HIV and the HIV epidemic that I didn't see being written about. I wrote it. There were things going on in the queer community I didn't see. I wrote it. And that's literally how I built my career, was by writing stories that didn't exist. And I mean, that's why the Toni Morrison quote, if there's a book that you want to read and it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. That's what All Boys Aren't Blue is for many people. This is the book that they have always wanted to read that never existed for them. And so I wrote it. And so I think that's really the best 3 tips that I can give when going into it. And I think the 4th tip would be not to be so hard on yourself. I was a terrible writer in the beginning. It is what it is. Like when you first start, you have to learn your voice, and you have to learn your rhythm. You have to learn your pacing. You have to learn the style of writing, whether it's 800 words, 1,200 words, 1,500 words, 2,000 words, whether it's an op-ed, whether you get to inject some of your own voice into it versus whether you got to kind of stick to the AAP guidelines, or it's a lot of different things that go into writing, but you learn that along the way. And the more you write, the better you write. And so not to be so hard on yourself. When you first start writing, it's probably going to be extremely heavy edits. It's probably going to be like, I still get heavily edited. I've written thousands of articles. I've written a best-selling book. I have a second book coming out. When I submit this next draft for this next book, I'm going to get a shitload of edits. It's going to be okay. The red marker comes out for even the best of us. So yeah, it is what it is, but yeah, not to be afraid of that.
What would you say has been your kind of biggest struggle writing this book? And do you feel like you've gotten past that, or is that something you're still dealing with, whatever it is?
The biggest struggle writing All Boys Aren't Blue was, I think it was really just the fear of getting it right. Like, it was like, because there was no roadmap in many ways. And so like when you're having these conversations out public, it's open for critique. And so there's this overwhelming fear of like, did I miswrite something? Did I say something offensive? Did I do something that doesn't make sense? And so I think that was the hardest part, was as researched and as well versed in knowledge as I am, I don't know everything. And so there are going to be moments where I may write something that I think that there's theory and there's other things that could contradict it. But what I've learned is like, you have to write the book write the book that you want to write, right? Like you can't write a book that's gonna appease everyone. You know, I don't have 5 stars everywhere. I have 4.8 here, and I got 4.3 on Goodreads, and I got like, you know, like you can't let the fact that your book didn't appease someone be the main thing that holds you and suppresses your writing and suppresses everything. And you know, I had a few critiques of the book, not many, but I had a few critiques of the book, and you just take them in and you just kind of process them, but you can't let that then make you go into a place of where you feel like you failed, right? You know, oftentimes we kind of like, we will overlook the 100 moments of praise just to feel bad about the one time someone critiqued it. And it's like, that's not that place that I operate from anymore. I think I did operate from that place when it first came out. But now I don't sweat the critique.
Yeah, it's that's their job. The editor's job, they're like that's the edit, what the editor does, that's what the reviewer does, like that's their thing, and your thing is the writing, and that's what you need to
the
be.
Writing. Yeah.
How long did it take you to write the book, actually?
It took a little over 2 years to write All Boys Aren't Blue.
Nice. Are you finding that like the next one is coming kind of similar pace, or are you like quicker now, slower, because you're like got this one under your belt and you're like, it's so good, I've got to do this again?
No, it took 2 years to write All Boys Aren't Blue. It took 9 months to write We're Not Broken. So I think All Boys Aren't Blue, I was finding my footing with my author voice, and so it took a while. It took a little longer for us to get there. I think like the stories were there and the words were there, they just weren't there. And so it took us, you know, some back and forth rounds to get it to where it needed to be tighter and put together. But again, I think that's why the second book was done in like half that time, because I now know I know what my voice is. I know what I'm trying to convey. I know what I'm writing. And so it looks a lot different now when it comes out.
Book after that, 2 weeks, you've got it. Done.
Right.
Out. We're almost at the time for the spoiler section. So again, anyone who's watching, if you want to leave any questions in the chat, please do so. We had a question. I'm going to ask a couple of more general ones. We had a question from Charlie Todd on the Discord, which was, what does pride mean to you? Very, very, very simple question, yet very complex question at the same time.
Yeah, it's funny because there's a billboard in Times Square that asked me the same question, and I gave my response. I mean, pride to me, it just means paying homage and respect to the Black and brown, trans, femme, butch, queer folks who fought so fervently against police brutality for 5 straight days in New York City to give us all of the rights that we have today. And remembering that pride is also Black history, because Marsha P. Johnson threw that brick, and Sylvia Rivera threw some punches, and Stormy threw some punches, and Miss Major threw some punches, and the Black and brown folks was out there throwing a lot of punches. And, you know, that makes this also a part of our Black history. And yeah, I really think that's what it is. I think pride is really about remembering that, you know, it was a fight and it was a riot. As anything other than that, pride was a protest. And we need to remember that when we move forward with any interactions of fighting for LGBTQ plus people, that the first pride was a protest and the first pride was a riot. And that is what got us here. So it may be what we need to get us to the next steps.
I'm going to do one more question before spoiler time, because just in case, I feel like this is a question that I want everyone to hear the answer to. Can you talk about the TV series at all? Can we know anything about what's going on there? And if we can, please tell us.
Yeah, TV series is still in development. I am currently, as of like when I get off this call, finishing up the treatment to get back to Sony. I've already had my meetings with Sony, so we kind of already know the direction of the show. So I just needed to clean up a few things with the original treatment we submitted a few weeks ago. The TV show will be based during my college years. So I think that'll be the most exciting time, because that's when I pledged and that's when I really came into my sexuality. So we'll be able to explore everything thematically that happened during that period, while also using some really unique devices to bring in those childhood stories in an important way. But yes, everything is moving forward with the TV development of the show. we're in a good place. So we are hoping to, hopefully have some news like about it by August, September.
Amazing. We will let everyone who's watching know. It will be on us. We'll be talking about it on our socials. I think that the book club can take absolute credit for the fact that at this point, I'm pretty sure every single book that we pick now has some kind of adaptation. We're just really excited to do some kind of like group watch of everything, just like binge watch every single adaptation of like all of these films and TV shows that are coming out of the book club books. We're like, yes, we're going to revisit you in like a year, 2 years time of all these different books that's now like going into the cinema, being on this streaming platform. It's so much fun. That's so exciting. I'm so thrilled about it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sweet. So I'm going to start the spoiler question section bit with a question from one of the readers, Pippin, who asks, some difficult subjects are raised during the book. Was it difficult writing about potentially traumatic parts of your life? And also, was there much back and forth with the publisher about what was appropriate for a teen book?
So to the second part of the question, no, it wasn't a lot of back and forth. We decided early on that we were going to put it all in there. And so I was given the space and the green light to put it all in there. To the first part of the question, yes, it is always hard writing about traumatic events because, again, I am not a person who is looking to villainize those who may have harmed me. I am looking to find a way to restore them and use the story as a vehicle to prevent it from happening to others. But it doesn't negate that it was still a traumatic event for me that I have to relive as I'm in the world talking about it, right? Because you constantly have to talk about it because people ask about it. So I think for me, though, it was pushing me to the place of healing that I needed to make sure that I had really healed myself from those traumas to move forward better in my current life and in my present relationships with people. But yeah, it didn't make it any less harder to write about. There was a lot of crying and a lot of soul searching and a lot of praying and a lot of the things that I needed to do to make sure that I was okay, to really let the world in on stuff I had never told anyone before. But seeing how everyone's reacting to it and how it is in turn helping others heal and doing the healing work, I'm very fortunate that I did it.
We've had some kind of, there's not necessarily a question that's come through from the Discord, but there's been a lot of discussion about like when people saw the cover and the title. I think they were like, their assumption would be that it would be a story that was specifically about like the trans experience or like the non-binary experience within that, rather than sexuality. And so I think not necessarily a question that they have, but I have a feeling that it's like a lot of discussion, like how was that for you in terms of like figuring out like what was going on with your gender, with your sexuality, and like talking about yourself as a boy and talking about how you viewed yourself then versus how you view yourself now. Like, how was that as a writer trying to kind of get a handle on that? If that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess for me, it really wasn't much to get a handle on, only because that was how I thought. Like, I never envisioned myself as an older person in this form. Like when I was young, I envisioned myself, like I really wish that I was Dominique Dawes or that I was someone like Dominique Dawes and could do gymnastics and be like this girl, and that's how I've envisioned myself. And I would imagine myself as that person in my head. And then, growing up with trans people in my family, I had representation of what my inside was feeling that I had to perform on the outside if I wanted to be that way. But again, I think it was about the journey of understanding that my transness looks like non-binary as my journey. It doesn't necessarily look like transitioning, and that's okay. And I'm glad I was able to kind of piece it together in that way. So that people could fully understand what my cousin's experience looked like versus what my experience looked like, and how those two experiences, although they ran simultaneously, they didn't end up at the same result. I thought it was important to, like I said, explain out as best I could how I was feeling inside, what my thoughts were in my head, how the things around me were influencing those thoughts, until I got to a space where I realized I could be who I am today. In however I want to present and however I want to perform. which takes it's still tough some days. There are some days I want to perform differently, and I think about safety, and I think about a lot of other things, and so I don't. But yeah, I mean, it's all a journey, and my ultimate goal was to showcase the totality of the journey, that it doesn't look linear, that it looks all over the place at times, because you don't fully have if you don't have the knowledge, then you don't know what's going on. So you're just making the best of what it is with who you are, with what you have. And that's what I wanted to make sure I got across, that I was on a journey with no flashlight. And so I was doing the best that I could through it. And all of those things were happening at the same time.
I was going to say, like, something that I find really interesting about the book is that you do have these elements of like, we're kind of going in age order, but then we're kind of jumping around slightly, and like it has, which I think you're like completely makes sense in terms of like the themes and the form like coming together to kind of have this like queered storyline almost of like, this is what's going on. So I was really interested to know, like, at no point even saying that idea of like jumping around makes it sound like it was like, what's going on? But like I totally was with you every step of the way as I was reading. I was never confused about what was going on or who these people were who you were referring to. Like, it all completely made sense. And then when there were elements of like, from what you'd explained about this person before, I had this idea of what was going on, but actually you're coming at and you're like, and that is just like emphasize more the idea of these like are real people who have complexities and they have these different sides to them, and like not as you might expect. Was that something that you had to think about, like from outside of the writing process, of like, what information am I going to give the reader at what time, when is this being introduced, like does this flow, or was it more kind of it just came to you in order and it just flowed out, and then you know that was more of a natural thing than something that was like designed from a kind of external point of view as a storyteller?
No, I mean, it was designed. I mean, that's why we broke it up into acts, because we had to do something to synthesize it, because it was hard, because some of the stories were about a specific moment, and then some of the stories were about a moment that then played itself out much later throughout my life. And so it was really about like, how do we get this synthesized in a way that it kind of makes sense so that people don't feel like it's jumping all around or getting lost in the story. It definitely didn't come linear to me. Like I wrote everything and I put it in the best order I thought, but then as you edit and you keep going through it, you realize like, well, I think this actually, let's do it this way and put these in kind of like sections while it's still chronological in many ways. And so I think that's how we ended the way we ended, with the book being the way it is. But it was definitely designed. It was not something that came natural. We had to really figure that out, because it wasn't just hitting on a story at a certain age so that you could just follow it along. And but I think it made the book that much better. So
I really enjoyed like you say, there are like specific moments, and then there are like moments that lead to a full story. And then there are also moments where it becomes clear that there's like almost, well, in more of a metaphorical way, right? Like the talking about being like thrown into the deep end of a pool, like in a very literal way, but then also like in life, right? Like that's something that becomes like metaphorically really resonant in that way. And it just feels like a really beautiful kind of like peeking into these different like aspects of your life and what was going on. And it was could you tell I really liked your book? How was it with your family? Have they all read the book now? Like, what was their response like to it? Was there anything that they either didn't know about or were like, oh, I didn't realize that this was your interpretation of what was going on at the time?
Yeah, I mean, many of them have read it. They loved it. They learned a lot about what I had been through, because they didn't know everything that had happened and everything that I went through. Their main thing was that it was my story, and to just write it and write the truth about it. I think the great thing about my family is that we always operated from a place of love. And so, you know, even in telling my truth, even if it was certain things that they had found out about certain family members that had done things, I don't hold any ill will. So it's no ill will for them to hold towards anyone either. And so, yeah, I think it was great as a family to be able to see my perspective on things. I think some of them, you know, felt that they had missed signs. And I was like, well, I don't think there were really signs to be missed. I was smart. Had good grades. I played sports. Like I was doing all the things that a normal teenager would do. So there was nothing for you to suspect. Like, you know, there wasn't like a dip in grades. There wasn't like a rebellious moment. There wasn't like, I didn't have that. That wasn't me. I was always to myself anyway, or hanging with my grandmother. So there wasn't a sign for you to see, you know, so there wasn't a sign for you to miss. It just happened. And I just dealt with them the best way I felt to deal with those situations. But yeah, you know, like I said, over a year later, my family is still very, very supportive, excited about the new book and, you know, the new stories coming out. And yeah, that's just how we have always rolled as a very loving family unit.
Amazing. I think this might be the last question if we don't have any other ones from the chat, which I think is quite a nice question to end on. What is the main takeaway you want readers to have from your story, whether that is readers in general or like a specific type of reader? Whether that is like someone who is totally removed from all of the identities you hold and what they might get from it, or like specifically to like young queer Black boys, what is it that you want them to take away?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to the non-queer, it is to take away that, you know, everyone doesn't exist in the world the same way that you do. And that the person to the left of you, to the right of you, to the front of you may not have the same experience as you. It may not walk the same path as you. So to walk into rooms and not assume, I think is the best way that I can describe it. Just because you see someone that you think is a man or you think is a woman doesn't mean that they identify that way. And so walk into a room with an unbiased assumption and ask questions and not ascribe identities and things to people who you do not know. I think that is, you know, one of the main takeaways is that, I mean, that's really one of the main takeaways that I need for them to understand that, you know, we all don't exist the same. We all don't walk the same path. So know that and know that we exist and, you know, acknowledge that we exist outside of this space of what you may have thought or assumed. To the queer reader, you know, specifically the Black queer youth, I just wanted them to know that their feelings are valid. And my story is the reminder that those feelings are valid, that your feelings have precedent, that this is not something new, and to not let anyone make you seem like this is an anomaly in a system or that this is some type of glitch in a system, that queer people have always existed, Black queer people have always existed. We were there during the civil rights, we were there during slavery, we were there in the Bible, we was there in Egypt, we was with any type of story, iteration of a civilization, we were there as queer people. And to know that I see them and that I'm going to continue to tell this story and to be this person so that they don't have to go through the same things that I had to go through.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a wonderful chat. For everyone who is joining the book club, just to let you know before we leave, next month's book is going to be, I know we haven't technically announced it yet, so this is hot off the press, Ava Aldred, who has written a book called The Boy Band Murder Mystery, which is going to be very much a departure from what we have read this month, but I'm very excited about it. So yeah, join the Discord and you will find out all about the books yet to come. And once again, thank you so much, George, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me.
And that's ended.